Grayson Perry, transvestite. One November morning in suburban Essex, I took my first apprehensive steps out as a woman, wearing a beige mat, a dog-tooth check skirt and a wig that I bought from a catalogue by pretending it was a present for my mother. I was 15. You've probably glimpsed us on TV, shy, exotic creatures of the night, stumbling to bus stops under cover of darkness. We're one of Britain's oldest subcultures, already well established in Victorian days. You probably know some of us already. Most of us are still in the closet. Look out for over-groomed eyebrows. I've been a transvestite all my adult life, but I've never seen a programme that gets close to what it feels like to be one. This is what a life spent wearing frocks has taught me. Scarborough, November 2004. I've come to the Harmony Transvestite Weekend. The Transvestite Weekend get-together is, for me, the quintessential way of enjoying dressing up, because you can come with a carload of suitcases and you have instant access to your wardrobe. And there's a kind of etiquette about how everybody is received, and it's always very sensitive and supportive. And I think that is one of the lovely things. And it's very easy to forget you're in the company of a group of blokes, ordinary blokes. A whole weekend of being a woman, and no risk of bumping into your colleagues or your children. For once in your life, you're free to decide what kind of woman you really want to be.
I'm actually a personnel and payroll administrator. I was a security officer up until about 2 years ago, but we were outsourced to a private company. There was a Baywatch programme, and there's a girl on there called Yasmin Lebeef, whatever her name was. I can't quite remember what it was now. But I thought Yasmin was a really nice name, and she was a really pretty girl. And so I thought, I'll pick that name.
As a job, I'm an engineer at Gatwick Airport, concerned with the maintenance of the baggage system down there.
I admire Dolly Parton and all the other people that are still mature ladies, still dress the part when they appear in public. I can't imagine Dolly Parton actually going shopping in a pair of trainers and jeans, can you?
I admired Gloria Hunnifin because I liked she always wear the green eyeshadow. I've always liked her for years, you know. I think she's a very genuine person.
I've always loved, I suppose, this sort of gypsy type woman, you know, like the Timotei advert, or a country setting, skipping through a field of poppies, something like that, in a nice summer's dress.
Yeah.
It's exciting dressing up as a woman, but there are problems with it. The first of them is everyone thinks you're gay. The vast majority of transvestites are entirely heterosexual, I'd say. And I should imagine the vast majority of the men here are married, probably with children, and happily so. And though they dress as women, they are not seeking sexual attention from men. Who they're seeking attention from is something that we'll probably find out.
Anyone for raffle tickets? Raffle tickets, anybody?
So given that you risk being thought gay or twisted or ridiculous, there's clearly something more at stake here than dressing up to recreate historic battles at the weekends. I slightly cringe when people say, oh, it's just a bit of fun, because these guys are risking often their marriages, their careers, their relationship with their children and their neighbours, not to mention their bank balance sometimes with the size of their wardrobes. So I think it is definitely a compulsion.
I've felt all my life that's the role I wanted to be, female, not male. There was something inside of me driving me to become Ursula.
I think about it all the time, and I don't know whether it's an obsession that I've got with it, but I know it's something that's always been there.
Always?
Always.
For a group photograph now.
Being a transvestite is a complex cocktail of motivations, and it's different for everyone. But there's often a strong sexual component to cross-dressing, although trannies sometimes find it hard to admit this. There's an adrenaline rush when you go out dressed as a woman. The rustle and scratch of the fabrics, the strange eyes darting over your body, the risk of discovery, mockery, humiliation. One thing that I'm kind of constantly aware of on this weekend, and I don't know if it's just me because that's a big part of dressing for me, is the sexual angle, and I feel it's kind of like an elephant in the room. I feel it really there, but nobody's really talking about it.
I think initially, certainly through my teenage years and puberty, like it was hugely erotic.
Yeah.
Massively so. But I think as I've got more used to dressing, it's become much more normal for me, and a lot of that side has passed on now. And it doesn't really, there's no real erotic part of it in it for me. Although doing the girly thing with a girl is a really wonderful thing for me.
With a girl?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think really all of us would dearly love to be quite fancied as girls, if you know what I mean. To actually truly be a babe or be a beautiful woman is quite a desirable idea. Whether any of us ever achieve it is another matter, but a lot of that is then expressed probably through the clothing and trying to be made possibly more attractive and maybe emulating girls that you've seen that you also think are attractive.
Maybe it's this erotic dimension that's the hardest part for others to accept. Some wives in particular find it difficult to deal with, although others come along on the weekends. How did you find out that your husband was a transvestite?
The hard way. Sorting out some drawers, and there was a pair of knickers, ladies' knickers, and they were huge. And I sort of looked and I thought, well, they're not mine, so whose are they? And it suddenly realised they were Jim's. And then I thought it was just a fetish thing, you know, and it would go away. He'd got me, so he didn't need those, throw them away. And it was disaster, really.
Oh, really?
Because we had to go and buy some more, didn't we? I could quite handle the sort of fetishy bit, the sort of knicker bit. I thought, well, you know, if he must, he must. But when it got on to can I have a bra and can I have a blouse and a skirt and the whole full, you know, outfit, then I was really distressed.
What do you think wives think about the erotic stimulation of dressing?
First of all, it's all about me, isn't it? About my femininity. Am I good enough as a woman? Is he doing this because I'm not good enough? So, of course, what do? Over the top, more eyeshadow, more lipstick, higher heels. Also, because the sexual balance changes, the TV tends to be more submissive, and women will describe the sort of lesbian element. And they say, well, look, I'm heterosexual. It's like asking somebody who's right-handed to be left-handed.
And so how now does it fit into your life?
I realised I'd be very disappointed with myself if I ran away at the first hurdle. You know, I thought, well, I'll give it a go. Give him a chance to sort of show me what it's all about. So we stuck it out, and a year later we got married. And we've been married 20 years.
The high point of the proceedings is the Miss Rose beauty pageant on the Saturday night.
The judges will be making their decisions during the raffle.
That's when the fantasies take flight. Well, the first time I ever came on one of these weekends, I sort of looked across the room and there were all the kind of slightly wonky wigs and nylon-y dresses, and I thought, oh, there's a lot of pain in this room. You know, they've all been through the mill a bit and been on a bit of a journey to get there. They were doing their best to meet their own very emotional needs. Sunday morning, time to pack the frocks away again. What things in particular do you find hard about the process of leaving?
Oh, just realising that you've got to go back to being the male for a few more weeks again. But that's the female, I think, that's within me. I'm more emotional. I cried for Ursula last night. It does upset me, but there you go. I know she'll come out again.
Yeah.
She'll be there again.
It can seem quite cruel going back to the tufty-rufty world of men after being in the company of some rather lovely ones. And I think it's painful that we do invest such a lot of emotion in often rather sort of brief glimpses of happiness. So what is it about being a man today that makes some men so desperately want to be women? All men live in a fantasy world to a greater or lesser extent. It's just that some fantasies are seen as suitably masculine, while others are unacceptably feminine. As well as being a transvestite, I'm also a biker. And the two things seem to me to have more in common than you might think. Oh. Well, that was scary, but not as scary as stepping out the door dressed in a skirt for the first time, and not as scary as telling your wife that you're a transvestite, that's for sure. But I think the two things have in common a sort of adrenaline addiction, really. What is the thing about whole thing about biking that makes you feel manly?
Being in control of a really powerful machine. It takes a big set of, you know what?
Balls.
Yeah, exactly. And men have balls, so that's it.
Also, there's an element here of display as well. I mean, looking at biker leathers, you know, they're quite theatrical.
I knew exactly what bike I wanted. I knew what colour I wanted the bike. And I guess for sheer vanity, I knew I also wanted my helmet and outfit to match.
That was important.
Yeah, well, maybe it's the whole costume thing, isn't it? You're a bit freer. You've been set loose by the costume that you're wearing, and you're able to be something a bit different, maybe.
A bit of a hero.
To yourself, maybe? To other people? I don't know.
The way the leather grips against the tank and the seat feels good, and you feel like in the zone.
They'll talk a lot about the function of the clothes, about their protective qualities or aerodynamics or something. Yeah, what about the hump on the back?
Yeah, I like it.
I mean, it's meant to be for aerodynamics, but
I think it's meant to be a bit for aerodynamics, a bit for back protection, maybe if you fall on it.
Yeah.
But I just think it looks cool.
Do you think there's an element of they're quite sexy? Putting the leathers on.
Nah, not really.
No?
Nah.
Do you think girls like it?
No, they don't actually. I know they don't.
Who are we in trying to impress?
Our friends, people around us. Yeah. You know, men.
When you do that zip up, are you kind of like sealing yourself into a kind of another world? Like
Yeah.
Become another person, I think.
Yeah. Well, you could actually, that could be the last thing you wear, couldn't it, really?
Whatever they say, all men dress to get particular kinds of attention. It's not unique to transvestites. It's just that the acceptable range you can display as a man is quite narrow. Talking to these guys, I think there's a lot of parallels between transvestism and being a biker. Except instead of putting on a skin of femininity, they're putting on a kind of carapace of masculinity. But it's still for show, I think. It's still about showing the world a role. This time, though, it's all man.
I think it's quite hard for men today because there is an increasingly narrow bandwidth of behaviours which are seen as exclusively masculine.
As women have, quite rightly, encroached on what used to be seen as male territory, all that's left is the negative things. There's less scope for a sensitive man to feel at home. And that's why I suspect it's harder to be a man than a woman these days. Being male is now the most pressurised gender. What kind of men do we actually want boys to become? I went to talk to some lads at an inner-city school about what they thought about being a man today.
Are you homosexual?
No. Most transvestites are straight.
That's why I want to know, because I had this prejudged thing, of like a transvestite as being gay. But then the fact that you're not gay, that changes things.
Yeah, well, I think that's what makes a lot of straight men uncomfortable with transvestites. If I sort of say, yeah, I'm a straight man, I've got a family, I've never, I've always had girlfriends, and I've got a daughter now, and I'm married, and they kind of go, oh, you mean you're one of us, and you still like dressing up? Ooh.
I think that's why you're having difficulty, because it's so much easier to say, and it's just like a quick escape route to say, you know what, he's gay, he dresses as a woman because he wants to be one. That's all right.
Why do you dress up in women's clothing? Like, I don't understand
because
why.
Because they want to.
No, but then you can want to kill anybody. Like, you can want to do a lot of things, but then like...
Yeah, but dressing up in women's clothes doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt anyone else. Nah, but still, it's something that's... There's something, like, not everything in this world, you don't do it because it don't hurt nothing. Some things are just wrong.
Well, I've seen transvestites in the street, and I'm like, okay, well, there goes a transvestite then. It's always just been... It's been a weird subject, if you know what I mean. It's been like, you notice them, but out of respect, you don't say anything. And out of, like... Despite you being against it or with it, you go, okay, well, that's what he wants to do. So I've never really had a problem with it. It's just been, okay, well, there's a transvestite.
I don't really think they're being honest, if you know what I mean. It's like, if you were dressed as a woman, I guarantee you everyone here would talk to you differently, would approach you differently, and would feel edgy when I shook your hand. If you know what I mean. It's like, the way it works. For me, I don't really have a problem, but that's probably due to society. It's like normal, you're allowed to do things, like gay is normal. But if you were to go to somewhere like where I'm from, Morocco, gay, it's not, well, it's rejected, if you know what I mean.
If you stood up and defended a transvestite in a group, they would kind of start associating you with it. And
that's where I'll stop. That's where I'll draw the line. As a group, I mean, we're so ignorant, we wouldn't ever think about the political correctness. Like, we wouldn't ever stop and say, hold on a second, that's not right, that's not right.
It's at this age that you see the pressures and confusions about masculinity in our society at their starkest.
You see women walking down the street in jeans and shirts every day, but they don't get called transvestites, no one looks
But they would have been in times past, they were.
But that's because there's not a lot of speculation around women.
Yeah.
If a man wears women's clothes, he's considered a transvestite. If a woman wears a man's clothes, she's considered sexy.
But that's because we've been run by like a patriarchal society for all these years now, and men have been at the high point, so we got nothing more to fight for. Like, we're at the top. Like,
well, that's an interesting question, I think. I always say men need to sit down for their rights. Men, they've got all the power, but maybe what they need to do is kind of go a bit.
But it's a fight to sit down. I'm fighting myself in a way, like it's more internal than anything else. It's not between anyone, and it's more about the unsaid battles kind of thing. Like,
you're at an age where you're kind of finding out what it is to be a man. What kind of things could you think you can and can't do?
As long as you name a feminine trait something else, it's all right. Like, so if I wore a pink ring on my finger and I said, all right, this means that I know how to fight and I'll knock you out, like, it's all right because that's what it means.
What about crying? That's the classic one.
Now it's okay. Now it's okay. In certain contexts, if someone punches you and you cry, then you're considered feminine. You're considered not masculine enough. You can't make the cut. Yeah. But if you're crying because your mother died, then that's okay. Now, before it would have been, oh, suck it up, take it on the chin, walk tall. Now it's, okay, well, when people's mums die.
What about crying at a record?
Depends.
It depends.
What's the record
If
about?
it's some if it's some Marvin Gaye, then maybe. If it's some truly deep guy.
Yeah, but if it's like the Teletubbies theme
then we just have to like cut the line. Like.
What are the negative aspects, the kind of bad press, if you like, that men get that you would like to see go away?
I mean, to hide their total self.
It's more subtle now than before. I mean, people might not necessarily say things to you, but they still expect them, and you know they do.
What sort of things?
What sort of things? Like, not necessarily accepting failure and being okay with failure.
But they might accept it on the surface.
Yeah, but you know, it's sort of like pat on the back, yeah, but the conversations when you're not there aren't necessarily ones that are going... Yeah, exactly.
For a man, well, a stereotypical man, if they're in the house and they're feeling stressed or whatever, they have to hold it back and keep it to themselves because they have to put up this front of being the man. So they have no of that emotional relief, should I call it.
As soon as we start to recognise and realise, that's the first step to success.
I think it's refreshing that the boys we talk to have a very articulate and a very self-aware view of what it is to be a man. How confident they are of totally fulfilling and expressing that idea within a group of their peers or in society at whole, I don't know. I'm hoping that in the future, boys like that will basically make the idea of transvestism redundant because men will be able to do anything within the male role.
Feelings aren't intrinsically male or female, but you wouldn't know that from the imagery we see around us. It's this apartheid of the emotions that transvestites are rebelling against. But it's a rebellion that's open to everyone. I've always wondered whether I could experience some of the things I get from being a tranny without crossing the gender divide.
How do you define a well-dressed man, Brian?
Well, basically, I was told when I started, a well-dressed man is somebody who can walk into a room and not be noticed.
And when I hear that, I'm a bit sad about that in a way. You know, after spending an awful lot of effort and money on looking well-dressed, I would want my money's worth out of it, you know, because I'm a bit of a show-off.
I was having a suit made at a tailor's in Savile Row. It was lovely, but it wasn't quite doing it for me.
You know, all these decisions we're making about the suit, they're all on quite a narrow bandwidth of the possibilities of dress, aren't they?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Like. I mean, you're trying on a suit which is basically a classic suit, aren't you? We've you know, the fabric isn't quite so classic, the colour's not classic or anything, but it's based on being a classic suit.
I think going back to sort of old ideas of manliness, one I'm rather fond of is the kind of effortless gentleman. The guy who is always aware of how to make the other person feel at ease. He's terribly polite and beautifully dressed, exquisite manners. This is a kind of formalised care, but I think when we threw out a lot of those old gentlemanly ways with the empire and the class system, I think we threw out the baby with the bathwater because there were some lovely things about those men.
There's a kind of straight man that I call an exquisite, although I fear they're a dying breed. They're dandyish men with a love of dressing up and an old-fashioned confidence in gentlemanly virtues. Deep down, heterosexual dandies strike me as transvestites' closest bedfellows.
What drew you into dandyism in terms of the rewards it gave you as a person?
It's fancy dress. I mean, for me, it was the past. I started buying old clothes at jumble sales when I was in my, I don't know, very early teens. I got it from all watching old films. I just thought it was so glamorous.
When you were drawn to being a dandy, do you think that you were moving away from certain aspects of masculinity that you wanted?
Conventional masculinity at the time, yes.
And what was that about it that you wanted to get away from?
The coarseness. You know, I want life to be as sort of cashmere soft and as sort of velvety smooth as I can.
You're not split?
No. I thought there was enough there in men's clothes to actually be getting along with. It never really occurred to me to dress up in women's clothes, I have to say.
Although I've been dressing up as a woman all my life, it's never made me feel any less a man. But some men feel so alienated from the whole business that they don't see themselves as men anymore. I was on my way to meet Charlotte, who's a transsexual, or TS. He's been taking female hormones which he buys over the internet and is contemplating gender reassignment surgery, the chop. Transvestites and transsexuals don't always see eye to eye.
I don't want to be perceived as part of the male race, to be honest with you.
Why not? What
Because
is
we've
it
got
about-
such a bad PR.
Do you think?
Yeah.
And what sort of things specifically?
Well, generally men are, without trying to male bash anybody, men are
Oh, go
more
on, go
aggressive. Men are generally more aggressive than women.
Mm.
Men have less understanding of emotion than women. Men pick up less emotional content in any given situation. They can walk into really dodgy rooms and think, oh, it's fine in here.
But
And
I
you
could
can-
feel quite insulted about that as a man myself.
No, but you're a transvestite.
But I'm still a man.
Yeah, but you explore your gender.
Yeah, but I am still a man.
So am I.
Right from the age of 5, were you aware that you wanted to go further than just dressing up?
I wouldn't feel that aggrieved not to have a penis.
Really?
To be honest with you, yeah.
I'd be horrified.
It's not the be-all and end-all of things, though.
No.
It's a case of having the balls or lack of them to go further.
So you think it's a kind of quite a macho thing to do then, to have a sex change?
No, I said or lack of them.
Yeah.
It's a very brave decision. Brave. You're assimilating bravery with being a man.
Well, often I feel with the whole transsexual phenomena that it's a problem principally with men. You know, most transsexuals, I think, are
Okay.
men. And it seems like they're dealing with their problems in a very male way. In that,
Well, explain a male way for me.
quite a mechanical way, quite a rational way, quite a empirical way. It's like lift up the bonnet, change the wiring, slam the bonnet down, off you go.
But what if it's not the bonnet end of things? It's the black box that controls everything else. If we're
Yeah, but I
talking
don't
purely
think-
in
yeah,
mechanical
so what,
means.
that's why I'm curious. You do strike me as quite a typical male in many ways. You know, the way you talk is quite sort of forthrightly.
I know, I'm just being assertive. Don't attach that with
yeah.
being a man.
So would you say that transsexuals then are, instead of putting on the clothes, they're using the surgery in the same ways that a transvestite uses the clothes?
Yeah, I'd have said it was an interesting split between the two, but sort of, yeah. It's not the be all end all of things, but generally it makes them happy. And
So
me being sort of down that road, it'd make me happy as well.
Oh dear, here come all the difficult questions. Does a bloke really have to chop off his penis to truly feel like a woman? And is it all a bit old-fashioned and sexist to make such a big deal of the differences between men and women in any case? Is the transgender community a glimpse of the future, or a bit of a blast from the past? To know whether transvestism has a future, you need to know a bit about its past. Until the later part of the 19th century, cross-dressing in ordinary life was an overwhelmingly female-to-male activity. Typically, it tended to be a woman just trying to get on in a man's world. But in the Victorian age, the traffic started to switch direction. Since then, transvestism has become an overwhelmingly male-to-female behaviour. So, Peter, when did you first become aware that there was this whole subculture below Victorian society?
It was when I came across the Englishwoman's Domestic Magazine, and there it's got corporal punishment, corsets, and men actually dressing up. Because these men now say that yes, they wear corsets and they wear women's clothes all together, and they like it. And these letters appear in the 1880s, mid-1880s. I simply revel in tight lacing and love to don female attire in the evening. Many girls and ladies would envy my figure. I would much love to meet with other tight lacers. Yours truly would be female.
Would you say that this sort of upwelling of transvestism was to do with the way that clothing in general was going in Victorian times?
Well, it went more and more extreme, became more and more feminine for the women and more strict and masculine for the men, like that. That was the background of it. And so these people, they thoroughly enjoyed, physically, getting into these garments when they had the opportunity.
It soon became clear that Peter's interest in the subject was more than just an academic one. So, Peter, there's a personal aspect to your historical interest.
Yes, there is.
Wow.
In two lines of connection or linking.
Oh my God! How many dresses have you got here?
I must say 300 or something like that.
Oh my God! All these dresses are satin or taffeta. Or
That is
silk.
right. When I was 8 at a children's school party at our kindergarten, I remember a girl called Heather wore a lovely rustling frock.
Yes.
And I asked my mother in the car going home, what was it made of? And she said, rustling silk.
And what an amazing collection. I mean, if only to be left alone with such a collection, I would certainly be looking for the size 14s. So what was it about the Victorian age that led to the flowering of transvestism? Peter had talked about the intoxicating rustle of silks and taffetas, but it had to be about something more. It had to be about the emotions that the clothes gave you access to. What do you think these dresses say about how the Victorians thought women should be?
Well, it is an ideal of a fragile beauty. You can see that very tiny waist, you know, suggesting sort of a creature who's not robust, not strong. So it's a covered up, sort of corseted figure.
Dr. Oriel Cullen showed me round the Victorian costume collection at the Museum of London. For her, it's a vital scholarly resource. For me, it was an erotic treasure trove. Wow. That is amazing.
So it's a lovely example of a late 18th century court suit. So it gives a really nice comparison with what's sort of coming on afterwards. And you can see it's incredibly flamboyant. And I have an early 19th century piece here from the 1820s, a frock coat. And you can see it's a lot more sober, a lot more practical. In the 18th century, perhaps, a man is more of a decorative piece alongside the women. You know, there is sort of that idea that he can be sort of a beautiful peacock. Whereas in the 19th century, it's definitely about sort of being seen to be busy, being seen to be working, being outside, being a man, following manly pursuits.
The growing gender distinctions of the clothes reflected what was going on in society generally. As the Victorians increasingly corralled all the softer emotions, vulnerability, gentleness, innocence, beauty, into an exclusively feminine realm. Men were cast as stoical, butch, practical providers and dressed accordingly. Is it any wonder that some men started to want to cross over? For me, what the Victorians wore is the most striking example of how clothes can come to symbolise complex emotions. But from a transvestite point of view, it's been downhill all the way since then. Walk down any high street in Britain and you'll be hard pushed to find visions of femininity to latch onto. Perhaps transvestites are the last Victorians, the last people who really believe in the symbolic dimension of women's clothes.
No, it's a Jewish wedding.
And how many people have you got coming on the day?
160?
Yes.
160.
I kind of want, when I walk into the room, you know, girls got that fantasy when you walk in and everyone goes, I'd love that. You know, like Eliza Doolittle when she walks into the ball.
Princess for the day.
Yeah, princess for the day, basically. And it's the only time, really, you get to be like that nowadays, isn't it? Princess.
The wedding dress is the last bastion in our society of the fantasy, frilly, feminine, properly symbolic frock. But I had a feeling it was dying out even here. For entirely understandable reasons, many women don't really believe in it anymore.
Women had to behave in a submissive way, and clothes reflected that.
Yeah.
And for me, when trousers came into fashion, it was like, and, you know, I could sit however I liked.
What strikes me is that it's almost like this idea of the feminine, the princess, the bride, is so foreign to the woman's normal everyday experience that it's become theatricalised. You know, for me, for a tranny, dresses are symbols of kind of vulnerability and innocence and submissiveness and things that men don't have access to. And there's something about putting on a dress that kind of instantly gives me permission to sort of act out those feelings. And
So perhaps we don't need to act out. Perhaps we, you know, we don't feel the need to act out.
Do you want to?
We can own it, but we can own our vulnerability.
What do you think of this one?
God, they all fit you so well.
Yeah. I reckon as things have got less traditional in terms of the ceremonies, you don't see obeying, women are a lot more powerful and kind of the roles are changing in terms of feminine and masculine. Then maybe we're actually kind of pushing back and getting more traditional. And now we can just do what we want.
So now you can indulge the fantasy because you know there's no danger of it being taken seriously.
Exactly, yeah. This is lovely. They're so pretty.
Do you like dressing up normally?
Yeah. Although, funny enough, I hate fancy dress.
I hate fancy dress too.
I hate it. I don't know why. No.
It's dressing up for amateurs.
Yes.
It's not just traditional femininity that's in decline. I wondered how much the rigid gender distinctions which transvestites are responding to really meant to young people today. I spent a night out on the goth scene.
What do you think about the kind of boys that wear makeup?
We love them. We love them very much.
We like the boys who wear makeup.
Really? What do you like about them?
I don't know, really. They're pushing boundaries and thus they're like more attractive.
People my age have much more kind of clearer, defined gender roles. Do you think people of your age are more kind of fluid?
Well, I think it's just getting that there. Males can be feminine, it doesn't really matter, you know, like, whatever you want to be, like, it's whatever you want to be.
What is it that they haven't got that all the other men have got? That's quite interesting.
They're well groomed.
Yeah. Out there to fight and stuff. But you don't want to see that all the time. You don't want a guy that wants to fight for you necessarily. You want a guy that just wants to be with you. You know,
Do you want a guy that you can fight for?
Yeah. I want to, you know, that I'm going to win the argument.
And do you think that's true if he's wearing makeup then?
Not necessarily.
But it does seem that, you know, the goth scene is very accepting of that. And what I'm interested in is the fact that, you know, are trannies kind of dissolving into youth culture? I mean, would you call yourself a tranny?
I don't think so, no. I'm just a pretty boy.
It'd be great if everyone could act as masculine or as feminine as they felt like, without worrying about the gender divide. And if that ever happened, there perhaps wouldn't be much point in being a transvestite. But in the meantime, there are some lessons I've learned from being a tranny. You don't have to buy into the rigid distinctions between maleness and femaleness we've inherited from the Victorians to see that we could all benefit from sampling a bit more of the whole emotional range. Jodie runs the Boudoir, a tranny dressing agency. Once a month, she transforms some of her clients into ladies who lunch. I wanted to ask them the question that making this film had posed for me. Can dressing up as a woman really be the answer to the problem of being a fully sensitive man?
A lot of trannies will always say that they've got a lot of female friends. You know, they've always had more female friends than male friends. And they've always felt that they kind of identified, you know, with the sort of feminine side more than they do their masculine side. That's not to say that they don't play football or, you know, like to go to watch boxing matches or do masculine things, because they do. You know, we've got a lot of sort of ex-military people and rugby players and people that do extreme sports, throw themselves out of planes. You know, they're very much in touch with their feminine side, but they're not effeminate as men.
So it is quite a split.
Yeah.
And what do you think it is about being a man that they're getting away from when they dress up?
I don't think that they're escaping being men. I think they're just escaping pressures of their everyday life. And
But that is as a man.
well, no, because women have pressures in everyday
Yeah, but
life
women
too.
don't escape it in such numbers as men do.
Well, we haven't got anything to do, that's why. I mean, that's why, that's where, you know, sort of trannies are lucky, really. I always say when people come in here, I think, you know, I sort of do somebody's hair and makeup and they get dressed and they sit down and they kind of take a big deep breath and it's like a real kind of, oh, thank God. And I sit there sometimes, I think, God, I'd love to have something to do where I felt like that, where I could just go somewhere and be somebody different and just escape, you know, from the pressures of my life.
I think what I've learned from being a transvestite over the years is that it is all about finding myself as a man. It's like there's a part of me, my original male self, that was uncomfortable. And so it kind of jumped ship somehow. The way that it manifested was transvestism. A kind of package, if you like, of feelings and behaviours that had been somehow banished from the kingdom of my masculinity. And so they lived in this sort of like island off the coast, if you like, called transvestism. And gradually I've been sort of like on the ferry, coming back and thinking, well, maybe they're quite handy in being a man.
I mean, and how would you like it done to yourself?
I wanted to know, well, what you thought about being a man that you were kind of rejecting.
The great majority of men are sort of living in, what the transgender vernacular is drab.
Yes.
That is the term, and it's called drab because it is drab. I mean, you do get sort of non-drab men, but they're very small.
I've still got some male friends, and I get on fine with them. But I don't like. I probably go out less as a man now, and I try and avoid the real blokey nights where it's all go out, drink, get absolutely paralytic, pull a bird, and that's your night out. That there is something slightly sad with that, I think.
I can never do anything right as a guy. Everything I do is wrong.
But, I mean, you specifically have said to me, when I'm at work, I feel very aggressive. I feel like I could throw a chair across the room.
Yes.
I get really wound up, and I hate that about myself. I hate the fact that I get aggressive.
I've had
but when you're
people-
dressed, you don't feel like that. You
No.
feel much calmer. So maybe what you're rejecting is this aggressive side that gets drawn out of you as a man. You feel like that's the way you have to be to cope with your
I
male
hated
environment.
myself as what I was 2 years ago. It's horrible. And the way I treated women. Now it's so much easier. Because one day I can be me, and another day I can be another me.
So what's the shift, you think, that you've done by dressing up?
It's made me understand, made me realise, it's made me a better person. It's actually made me a better person.
I've seen programmes where women have been made to look male, and what they've always said is what a kind of cruel and harsh world men live in. Now, if you are sensitive and find that an anathema, you'll find dressing is a partial solution to some of that, on an emotional level.
When they meet each other in the boudoir as girls, they'll go, hi, mwah, mwah. And when they say goodnight at the end of the night, when they've got changed back, they go, oh, good to see you.
Isn't that strange?
And they shake hands as men.
In our normal lives, we're all in a rut. Every single person in Britain. We just have to make sure that the rut that we're in is wide enough and flexible enough and we're happy in it. But sometimes it's wonderful to be able to do something and get out of your rut, even though you like your rut, and do something completely uninhibited.
I think I've had a fair experience about what is on offer to the transvestite, you know what I mean? And it's always kind of like, am I emotionally satisfied with the experience? And I always think it's a crude way of dealing with something that I think could be dealt with more graciously, or almost gracefully, in my everyday life. And so when I'm out dressed, it's good enough, but often I come home thinking, at my core level, I'm a little bit unsatisfied with the experience.
No, I don't actually agree with that. I don't think it is a crude box for me. It's not, it's actually quite a sophisticated box, if you like. It's got lots of different shades to it. I can be conventional, a bit outrageous, depending on the circumstance. You know, they're all things I never allowed myself before. So, you know, so far it's been a saviour for me.
I'm happy. You know, I'm confident in who I am, what I'm doing. And I guess the dressing's a part of that, a large part of that, but it's allowed me to be just more relaxed and just confident.
I think ultimately it's a blessing. It's immensely difficult to deal with, but when you get through that and cope with it, it's actually a better place to be than perhaps a lot of people are actually in. Because I think, you know, I think the idea, you know, when it gets confused with what being a real woman's all about, that's a bit of a misnomer in a way, because, you know, we're not real women. And we're not experiencing what real women experience. We're experiencing something different to what most men experience.
Have a look at my sausage, girls. Don't be shy.
I think what transvestites are trying to do, sometimes in a clumsy, slightly humorous way, and sometimes not with the greatest self-awareness, but often very elegantly and interestingly, are trying to be whole people, to show their whole selves. And I think that's a great thing. I think that is an aim for all of us. Maybe transvestites are kind of the most graphic example of the pressures that men are under and the role that men are expected to fulfill. I think they're kind of quite brave for putting up with a lot of stick, really, in order to be wholly themselves. I think they are showing us something about what men could be. I'm not saying that men should wear dresses, it's just that symbolically they're saying there's something up with being a man. And maybe next time we see a tranny in the street, we say, hey, look, it's one of those transvestites, good for him.